Welcome, Dr. Bob. Namaste. I hope you're well. You can hear me? You can hear me
Perfectly.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Dr. Bob. People are really looking forward to meeting you, to listening to you, to see your presentation, and they're very excited. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, 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 Vivek. Welcome, Judith. Welcome, Vijaya, Indra. Welcome, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a few people today for Dr. Bob's presentation, and I know that you're very excited to know more about generalcanter and his work. I've been chatting with him before this webinar, and I know that he's, he's one dedicated soul who has brought this up with his colleagues and his team. So I will not take too much time talking about the kind of work because he has to talk about it. In the meantime, before he gets started, let me quickly introduce you to him and also give my own introduction to you. So about Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob Planque is a co-founder and administrator of generalcanter, a website for sharing recordings of sound of wild birds from all across the world. He started this project in 2005 together with William Pierre Willinger with the aim to make recordings of bird sounds more accessible to people around the globe and to give everyone a platform to share their knowledge and experience. In his working life, Bob is an associate professor in mathematical biology at the University of Rai in Amsterdam, which is the Netherlands. So that's about Dr. Bob Planque and a bit about me. Most of you already know me, but those who don't, I am Mohit Aggarwal. I'm an experiential ecotourism specialist with a deep love for nature. I help people travel to some wonderful places in Asia. I'm on the board of Asian Ecotourism Network, and I've been trained and certified by GSTC in sustainable tourism. I'm the founder of Asian Adventures, a 27-year-old travel outfit. It is the largest bird watching tour company in India. I'm also the founder of Netter, a value email marketing company that is now working towards strengthening communication for wildlife outfits. The company is on a large mission to help Asian elephants with their corridors, free the Himalayas of plastic waste, help small wildlife rangers, and conserve the ancient Himalayan shrines. So that was a bit about me and a bit about Dr. Bob. And I think I'll let Dr. Bob go on with this presentation. Over to you, Dr. Bob, and thank you for being here once again.
Thank you very much, Mohit, for your kind introduction and for having me here tonight. It's sort of late afternoon over here. Let me have a look how this presentation, how I'm going to get it there. Okay, now you should all see it. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Excellent. So, welcome. My name is Bob Planque, and together with Willem Pierre and Sander, I've set up generalcanter, and I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about its history and well, what our aims and goals have been and are, and where we're going to be in the near future. And hopefully, I can entice you, some of you, to also start or keep contributing to generalcanter. So Willem Pierre and I started this back in 2005, and together with Sander Pietersen, we run this as a very small team. And as you will notice throughout the talk, the number of people behind generalcanter is much larger than just the three of us. And Willem Pierre and I are essentially the people that moderate some discussions on the website, and we kind of run the project. But apart from that, most of the stuff that is run is actually run by others on the web. So if you have never seen the website, let me just briefly give you an idea of what it looks like. This is an example of a front page of generalcanter, in which I don't know if you can see a pointer. No. Well, then I'll just say it in words. So in some green boxes at the top, you'll get a little highlight of some interesting, sort of very special recording or something that with a special story, and you get some collection statistics, just to give you a brief update of where we are at the moment. There's some stuff on latest news. There are always some snippets, and people can contribute also to that if they want it. You get a list of latest editions, which are just the last recordings that have been shared, and some other small bits like little tips and a random recording just to give you a flavor. If you go into some of these recording pages, on the left here you see a species overview, where in this case it's a European species, Ectorine warbler. And you get a map with lots of dots. I'm not sure how big it is on your screen. There will be some examples of bigger maps later on. And so you can see range maps as well, and all the dots will signify where the recordings have been made, and you can find sonograms below that if that is a way of viewing that you like. So that is something that you can set in your settings. So sonograms are little pictures in the gray, black and white pictures in which you can see the frequencies used in a bird song over time. And on the right, you can see a list of a person, so some recordist who has contributed a number of recordings. So you just get a list and a little map of all the recordings. And there are several ways of navigating the website in this fashion. So what I would like to share with you today is to give you a flavor of the history, how we all got this started back in 2005. So how did it start in development after having started? Why has it actually worked? What kind of characteristics of the project have made this successful? The recent past, so the last couple of years, where we are now, the present and the future. Then I'll briefly talk about how Asian recordists can contribute, and so what you can do to make this project better, and how you can get the most out of generalcanter. So if you want to really delve into the technical bits and become a power user, how can you do that? So let's start with the very early history. So essentially, Willem Pier and I were both and are, so we were and we are South America fanatics, and both of us in our free time, we spent some weeks in different locations. For instance, Willem Pier in the 90s went to Peru and recorded bird songs there, and I spent some time in Ecuador and also further south in Peru. And we both had our recordings, such as this Andean Patu, which is a picture on the right, of which very few recordings currently still exist. So we had these tapes from rain and cloud forests from the 90s by Willem Pier and from the early 2000s by me. And we essentially made sort of dawn chorus inventories. We just went out there and pointed microphones in the dark. And this I'm saying actual people on the slide, because these days people also do this in automated fashion. That was, I think, pretty much not done back in the day. We are not specialists. Both Willem Pier and I are not specialists. Willem Pier is a material scientist and I'm a mathematician. So we basically had lots and lots of questions once we had done this. And there were some good reference collections, such as the Macaulay Library was also already very big, and the British Library in London was also very big. But they were inaccessible because they were not digital yet. And the British Library still is largely inaccessible unless you go there. And it's also rather incomplete. There were some tapes that you could buy. There were some CDs with say 100 species that you could buy. They've been around for a while. But if you buy those and you have those, then you find very quickly that the bigger your personal collection of tapes and CDs, the harder it is to search through them, because the only real way of searching is, well, essentially just going through it all and trying to find something that matches something you've recorded in the wild. So we just have lots and lots of mysteries. And all the people that we knew or we knew of, well, they were difficult to reach and had no time. They simply didn't know us well enough. And there are other things to do as well, obviously. So we basically got together, and essentially for just 1 hour we got together. We met by email, and in during a 1-hour chat in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, Willem and Pier and I met, and we decided then and there to do something on the web. So we both had inspiration from this marvelous product, which was by Sjoerd Meijer, happens to be also a Dutchman and also a mathematician, who had programmed something himself and for Bolivia, and that is good for Peru as well because of the overlap in species. And this gave us many, many more species, and also much more easy to navigate because it was not a CD, so it really had some kind of interface. And it also had lots and lots of species that were in the background, all named by Sjoerd, who was very good. And so this gave us some inspiration to that there were lots of people that were struggling with the same issue. There are only very few people that are real experts, and lots of people that like all these bird sounds and want to contribute, but there was no real platform to do this. And so we thought that the World Wide Web offered good opportunities, cheap and cheerful technology, lots of open source packages that we could use. And so we started this project in 2005. When we did this, we started in South America because this was really what we wanted. And both Willem and I had a book at home, which is called Neotropical Birds by Douglas Stotts and others from the 90s, which was really when it's still unique in its kind, in that it classifies every single bird species in Central and South America along about 50 different characteristics, such as habitat, but also elevation and food use. And the remarkable thing is that it is complete. That is to say, if a cross is there, then there's some data to back it up. And if a cross is not there, then there is quite good evidence that it is not, that this particular dimension doesn't apply to that species. And they did this for 4,500 species, so about nearly half the world's birds. And so we emailed this Doug Stotts to ask whether we could use that database as a backbone for Xenocanto, so that you could use that to search. So then you could say, I'm in the Atlantic forest and my habitat is tropical lowland evergreen forest. There's not a lot of that around in the Atlantic forest, so maybe better montane evergreen forest. And you would immediately get only species from that area. And so this made searching easier, and we use that for that. And if you're familiar with the current website, this doesn't exist anymore because this database has never been expanded to the rest of the world. And as far as I know, Europe doesn't have one, and neither does North America, which are surely the best known places in the world in terms of birds. So we did that. And the other thing that we came up with, which is also has been abandoned, is that we asked people to score sounds in a very simple and superficial way. So you can say the length was maybe 1 or 2 seconds, or of the sound in the recording, or it was maybe 3 to 10 seconds, or even longer. Or you could classify the volume as increasing or decreasing, or steady or variable. And in this way, you could find things that were kind of alike in very qualitative ways. So the examples that you find below are all things that have, let's say, 3 to 10 sound elements and have an increasing frequency. And even though if you immediately look at these sonograms, they probably sound very different, but you have kind of thrown away 90% of all the things that really do not sound alike. And so you can still search within this this little 10% that is still available, and thereby more quickly find a name to a sound. So this is a good idea for South America, because South America has a very large number of songbirds, particularly that do not really learn their songs. There are some exceptions perhaps, but well over 1,000 species seem to have very static sounds and very simple sounds as well. And so for those sounds which are really confined to South America, this strategy just worked well. But it didn't seem to work very well in Europe or in North America, or indeed in the rest of the world. And so we abandoned it because it was kind of fruitless. So how did we kind of branch out from South America? Well, we first took in North America because that was just a couple of hundred extra species. And then we branched out in 2008 to do Africa, then Asia, then Europe, which is kind of surprising since the whole team was European. But for us, that is kind of the least interesting region because it is rather small and very well researched. And then at the end, we also included Australia. And then, of course, we had lots of different lists, and we had to do some work, actually a lot of work, to get it into one list. And we chose the list from the International Ornithological Council, and really had to do a lot of work to kind of put it all into one footing. And one of the cool things of the IOC list is that it is well documented. So they update the list and they give good arguments which you can agree or not agree with, but at least it is documented why certain species are split or not. And they also have a complete list of subspecies, which is very cool and for us. And there are also lots of country lists that go with it, and translations of all the names into different languages, which is also nice. So we decided that's just one nice world list, and use that. And then the design, which was really like this when I started it, so I programmed it essentially, but I'm not a programmer, and so it became worse and worse with the advance of HTML technologies, and so a guy called Jonathan Jongsma from the United States, who was a programmer, came aboard, and we asked him to completely redesign it. And so the way it looks now is essentially his style that he made at the time. And now he's done with Xenocanter and does other things. So it now looks like this, and we're still quite pleased with all the work that he's put in there. So at the moment, there are about on the order of 8,000 people that have actually contributed recordings, but there's a multitude of that, maybe 30,000, 40,000 people that are registered and can contribute on the forum or in some other way. So it's really quite a successful project. So I'd like to take some time to talk about why we think it has actually worked, apart from the fact that it was a good idea at a good time. It was something that wasn't there. That is obvious. So one of the clear characteristics of Xenocanter is that it's open. So we very conscientiously decided to use Creative Commons licenses and to allow sharing. And recorders can choose different licenses, and they all have some copyright, so Creative Commons copyright that allows sharing, and they all require that if a recording is used by someone else, then the name of the recordist has to be accredited. So I see a typo there. You can choose to make it non-commercial, so that the use by others must be non-commercial. Many people do that, but others, they choose for a so-called share-alike license, which forces anyone who uses recordings to share their work, so the derived work, under the same license. So that may be commercial, but then of course the commercial work may be also used by others. And so that is also commercially, for instance. So that is also a possibility. And you may choose or not to allow derivatives of your work. And we have seen all kinds of funny derivatives, such as podcasts, but also theater shows, house music, so with remixing sounds, which we thought was really cool, but we know one recordist was really angry over that and just took all of his recordings offline after that, back in 2007, I think, someone from Mexico. And we thought it was actually really nice, but this person just didn't like it, so that's fine. So the aim is that we want to collect bird sounds, obviously. In fact, we're going to branch out soon, hopefully, to other things than birds, but for now, it really is all about bird sounds. That means that we want to have all taxa, so species and also subspecies. But within these, there are many species have very large repertoires, and we simply want, it's not simple, but we simply want complete repertoires on file, and also to have complete geographical variation. And so these are the aims. Whether we're actually going to get there is a different matter, but it means that even though we have virtually all species now, this is still far from complete in our book. And so to give one example, there's a group in Leiden in the Netherlands that really focuses on female birds and their songs, because it turns out there are lots of species whose female birds actually sing fully, but people just are not very much aware of that. And of course, we want to, the bigger the collection, the bigger the problem to navigate it. And so we also want to classify birds into useful groups to increase the accessibility and also to allow other people to find new knowledge from all these different birds, and also allow others to do these classifications for themselves by making subsets and searching in some way and so on. Another thing that we like to do, it doesn't always work because of obviously but we try to involve local people. We've always thought that it's much better to involve local people that know the birds in their backyard much better than any sort of real Western tourist, if that's my perspective at the moment, that goes there, flies there, and sees that bird or another, and then goes back home. Right? Or researchers that go to a place that they don't really know very well. It's just a good idea to try to give the local people the tools to contribute. So just as an example, Algerian nuthatch is a species that is in every European book, but it was found only in the 1970s for the first time, I think. And very little about it is known, essentially, because it only lives in two or three forests in the north of Algeria. And so there were a couple of people that had recorded it, but we found some Algerian biologists that have now recorded it and have an active program there to try to conserve this species. And so it's really cool for them to contribute to a project like Xenocanto or eBird or Observator.org or other open platforms to contribute their knowledge, and so because they can do it better for a longer period of time without sort of big funding. Another thing we've also liked, and this was very much inspired by the DVDs by Sjoerd Meijer on Bolivia, and there's another one that may be more familiar to you that was also programmed by Sjoerd, that was made by Jelle Scharringa on the birds of tropical Asia, also from the about 20 years ago now. All the birds in these, so that means not only the ones that are focal in the recording, but also all the background species, they are named. And this is relevant on multiple levels. So first of all, if a bird sings, it doesn't sing just for its mate or for the others of its same species, but it actually has to sing against a background of other species. And we know that birds may sometimes sing differently as a result of background noises. We also make it find it important that to allow searching on these background species. So sometimes you hear a recording for some reason and you hear something in the background that you weren't looking for, but you think, wait a minute, that was something I heard some time ago, and now I know that it must be one of these species if at least the species list on the background is complete. And so it allows for searching. We also had a way of making networks that is now also absent from the website as it is currently, because we didn't find a good way of getting it across to people. Essentially, you can use these background species to make networks of who syncs with whom. And then you can ask yourself, for instance, well, I heard something, I don't know what it was, but I heard this sort of like species A in that same location and species B in that same location. Give me now other species that commonly co-occur with these two things that I had heard. So we'd made that, and it was fun, but it seems that no one used it because apparently we didn't get that idea across. So for now, we've abandoned that idea. It may come back later if we can find a good way of getting it across. We also try to tell everyone, educate them a little bit to write down everything. Many people don't do that, but some try to do that. And so actually some people that have contributed heavily on generalcanter have also written a guide on how to do this well and what to write down. And so the more data is there, the better it is. Also just for your own memory, but also as context for others. I think one of the things that kind of stands out, in which generalcanter stands out from other projects, is that there are no authorities. So I would be called an authority in some ways, but I'm an administrator in my view, and I am certainly not an expert on bird sounds in the way that some of my fellow colleagues or contributors are. The point really is that everyone just makes mistakes, and any recording should be able to be discussed by anyone. Everyone can make a contribution in this way. And so the idea of 100% certainty does not exist in our view. We just continuously revise the recordings, but that also means that the discussion that goes along with these revisions has to be kept. And so on the whole, about 1% of the recordings in the database have been changed. And if a discussion is opened, then the administrators are the only ones that can close the discussion if we read that there's been a consensus. If there is no consensus, then that's also fine. It means there's something interesting with this recording. And so that's actually a feature and not a bug. Because maybe that's something that, that's a particular sound of a particular species that really sounds very much alike to something else. And so this is something we can learn from. All right. So we try to keep all the discussions, and there are now on the order of 40 or 50,000 threads to do with mystery sounds and discussions on species identity. The vast majority actually is on mystery sounds and not on mistaken identities of things that have been uploaded. We published some highlights. I've taken here a couple from Asia. I think there's a minority from Asia. If you know some cool story about something that was very rare, or species whose recordings have never been published before, newly described species, or something just has a very funny story, like the other day where we had something from Australia, which is a flycatcher from Thailand, which is very little known, and it turned up in Australia, and it was so little known that its sound recording was, I think, still unknown, and so there was something in the books, but nothing on tape, I think, and they couldn't even identify it by DNA because it was so unknown. And so the person, Frank Rind, in Thailand or Singapore, who was working on this, he had a specimen, and so they could identify it on the basis of the DNA, but it was not published yet. So that was a funny story that both contained sound and DNA research to identify a bird species that we put into a highlight. So if you have a funny story like that, then just drop us an email, and maybe we can make that into a story to put on the front page. So let me go over that to the recent past, present, and future. So how the last couple of years been, where are we now, and what will the recent, so the near future bring? Well, we used to be a very small operation. So the project is very big. There are tens of thousands of people involved in all, but we are just 3 people. And in fact, none of us actually do it as a job. There's no money going in, essentially, and there's no money going out. And that means that it also can't fall over, right? There's never a shortage in money if there's no real money in it. And that means that it's not that there's no money, but it was so little that it really didn't matter. It's on the order of 2,000 euros a year. And Naturalis, for a long time, the museum in Leiden in the Netherlands, has kindly offered since 2008 to cover those costs. So essentially, this was an ethics project. So something just you run from behind your behind your desk at home. But of course, it grew bigger and bigger, and we went from at some point we were running 2 dedicated servers, one for backup and one to run the site. And the code was getting out of hand, and it had to be updated, and it needed to stay interesting also for us and for the audience. And the traditional museums, such as the one in Leiden, the Natural History Museum in Leiden, they're all going digital. So there was also a bit more competition, certainly more than, say, 10, 15 years ago, which is a good thing. So that means it keeps us all sharp. So in 2018, we decided that it would be better to have more cooperation with the Naturalis Biodiversity Center, which is a museum that has existed now for over 200 years, and it is the 5th largest museum of its kind in terms of the physical biodiversity collection. And they are running a very big digitization operation for the entire collection. And so for them, we were very small, and but big in outreach. So, and since we're essentially a Dutch project with a global outreach, we were interesting. And so we decided to make an agreement with them. So currently, the website is run from the infrastructure at the museum. And they also have an IT department. And once in a while, we pay them to do some maintenance work and also to do some new things, depending on money projects that we are able to get funded. And so, because Naturalis is such a big player on the biodiversity scene, it also allowed us to get our data into the GBIF. So that is the Global Biodiversity Infrastructure, which is one of, I think, the biggest world portal for information on biodiversity. And we also decided that is kind of partial at the moment to open up the code. So that is not complete. At the moment, there is a GitHub repository, and people can download, or they will be able to download the code very, very soon and contribute to the project from there. The number of contributors has increased, and there's a these are the number of people that have contributed recordings. The other people that have registered, we don't really keep tracks of. It is about 4 or 5 times this number. And but you can see some funny trends, such as the spring in the north. So you can find these green arrows here. These are the spring region, May and June, where many people go out in the northern latitudes in Europe, and in I think mostly in Europe, actually, much less so in North America, where eBird has a stronger presence. And of course, we have the COVID jump, where everyone was at home and lots of people, so about 1,000 in 1 month, people contributed actively to Xenocanto. And the number of new people also dramatically increased. But for many people, it was actually also a way of taking their shoe boxes of old tapes, digitizing. People had time on their hands to play around and do things like Xenocanto. And this is the number of recordings over time. It runs up to about 650,000 or 630,000 at the moment. And it's steadily increasing. You see some big jumps. One was the collection by Peter Boesman, who's just a single person. He's Belgian. And in 2015 decided that he could live off of his recordings. He's one of the very few people who can do that, I think, in the world. But he's also kind enough to just share his entire collection, about 20,000 recordings, and with us and with the world. And so that was a big jump in 2015. And of course, COVID gave us a huge jump, and it is still increasing. So it's still very high. It's on the order of 10,000 recordings a month at the moment, which is really ridiculous if you think about it. And the number of species has also steadily increased, but you can see that we were already at 6,000 species back in 2009. And so it's a very slow accumulation curve. And so even Peter Boesman's collection, which was uploaded in 2015, you can see the number of species per month in those months were very high, but the number of new things was very low. And so at the moment, things just trickle in. But one of the most impressive statistics, I think, of the breadth of people's contributions is that on the order of 2,000, so 1/5 of all the bird species in the world is uploaded every single month. And so that's just a testament to where everybody lives who contributes. You know, it is really worldwide. So at the moment we have on the order of 630,000 species, over 10,000 species, but an additional 12,000 subspecies. And so there are about 22,000 taxa, 23,000 taxa represented, and over 10,000 hours of time. And that number, 10,000, actually was reached, I think, just a couple of weeks ago. This is a very schematic drawing of where we are and where some others are. And everyone is moving sort of to the top right corner. And I, for instance, have no real idea where eBird is at the moment, because they're increasing very, very fast. And I think it is one of the other major new operations, very successful, and a very tremendous boost to global knowledge. And they have also started to do recordings. I have no idea how many there are, maybe much better, more than 10 to the 5, I don't know. So, but everyone is moving forward to this. Wiki Aves is a Brazilian initiative, for instance, that has also on the order of 100,000 recordings, which is really just Brazilian recordings, which is amazing. And there are others like the British Library, which has nothing digitized because of copyright problems. They can't just put things online, but they have very large collections, still waiting to be opened up to the public. So how is all of this wealth of information, how is it all used? So I'm a mathematician at a university, one of the 2 universities in Amsterdam, but I always kind of joke, but it's not really a joke, that the work that I do that really has an impact is Xenocanto and not my mathematical work. The reason being that other people use the collection to write scientific papers. And at the moment, I checked for this presentation, I just checked it a couple of days ago, over 3,000 academic papers apparently use Xenocanto. So that means if you search for Xenocanto, you find about 3,000 hits. And these are people of all stripes, including, for instance, computer science people that try to do automated recognition, but also conservation biologists, taxonomists, what have you. And so some people first do research and then deposit the recordings with Xenocanto to make them available and then highlight them in their paper. Other people have used the recordings that are on the database to write new papers, for instance, to study geographic variation within species and so on. Several mobile apps have been programmed, not by us, but because there's an API, an application programming interface that allows you to get raw data out of the database, you can use that to build apps And there are several around. So the logo on the right of your screen is from the Warbler app that I think is used by many people. Plenty and plenty of websites of all kinds of stripes use Xenocanto. You can embed recordings. And as I mentioned, we get requests for all kinds of uses that never see the light of day on the website, such as theater productions, radio shows, podcasts, or displays along nature walks, where they integrate some kind of audio material to make it a bit more lively. People have written scientific software such as Warbler, which is uses the statistics package R. That's the logo at the bottom. And there have been machine learning challenges. The logo on the left, for instance, A Guide to the Birds of South America, that's a CD in which a British guy, El Buho, he calls himself, used several recordings from Xenocanto and then collaborated with different producers and musicians to create music, and that CD you can, for instance, listen to on Spotify. So one of the things that we've been involved in sort of more actively ourselves is it's called the bird clay, or bird clay is French, hence I do not pronounce the F. The bird clay task, which is part of a larger set of machine learning tasks in which they try to set large challenges. So hundreds of species, at the moment it's thousands of species, and people can take their algorithm and try to recognize all these species. And so the people that were behind these challenges, the organizers, wanted a large corpus of accessible sounds. And so we were one of the few places that they could get these recordings from. And so we've been collaborating with them, and they are currently mainly on South America, because our collection holdings for South America are still bigger than in other parts. And also Europe, I think, is now part of the challenge. And the current state of the art there is that it works reasonably well for individual species. So there's quite a big chance that if you take a random recording, that it'll give the right species name with a certain percentage, say 80% or so. But if you try to give it a random recording just of a soundscape, so there's nothing really at the front of the recording, nothing much louder than the rest, then it has great trouble. And all these algorithms still have great trouble trying to identify all the different species in there. The performance is still very poor. So what do we hope to do and to expand into the next couple of months and maybe 1 or 2 years? Well, we managed to get some funding to do grasshoppers. So in the Netherlands, there's quite a group of aficionados, so of enthusiasts for grasshoppers, crickets and grasshoppers, and they've been asking us for a long time to do their sounds, because they all make lots of sounds, and they also recognize them by sound. And that also means we have to do WAVs instead of MP3s, or at least lossless, so not compressed recording. And because grasshoppers have much higher frequencies often, and so MP3 is just not a good medium to do that with. And so that means that we have to rebuild some of the database and to allow that. But of course, that means we also will do that for birds. So that's a cool thing. And we will start planning that in June. So that's very, very soon. And I hope by the end of the year, or maybe early next year, we're going to see the first fruits of that. The code is already open source, so the link that is over there, I could also put it in the chat later on if you like. It's already out there, but the one thing that is missing is a database of sounds which doesn't have personal, so privacy-related information in it, so that you can play around with it and get a local version of the database on your own computer, and then program new features for Xenocanto that can go back into the project once they have been developed. We also plan to start automated recognition. Now we've been involved in this bird clay challenge for 7 years. And of course, we have built up a number of sort of connections with people that are very active in this field from a machine learning perspective. And one or two of these people that have been very successful within these challenges we're going to collaborate with to do automated recognition. And so this may be useful for everyone else if you have recordings that you do not know the name of, but it also is very useful for us because, for instance, we can take all the great tit recordings, and there are more than maybe 2,000 or 3,000 of those, and we can start classifying those on the basis of these algorithms. So we can just ask how many groups of different, qualitatively different sounds are there in this chunk, and that makes it also easier for us to present these sounds to you. So we can find, for instance, if there are 5 groups, we can give maybe 3 or 4 good ones for each of them, and so you can get a better idea of the repertoires that are in the collection. So indeed, working on these repertoires is one of the things that we've actually wanted to do for a long time, but we partly need these algorithms to do that, but we also need to program it such that people can contribute. So in Brazil, for instance, there's been one person who is Jeremy Mintz, who knows everything about bird sounds in Brazil and has already for himself made classifications of repertoires for Brazilian birds. But this kind of classification of the different song types, he can't do for other sounds. I mean, it's also way too much work, but we would like to make a kind of infrastructure so that everyone can contribute this. Doing grasshoppers finally allows, hopefully will also open up to us to do mammals and frogs, and of course then just natural sounds in large. So we are getting close to kind of branching out beyond birds. So how can everyone contribute? I'll be a bit brief here, because I'm taking a bit more time than I thought. Essentially, most species that we have on file with very few recordings. Few species have many recordings, but most of them, thousands of species, just have 1 or 2. So we just need more of those. It's just as simple as that. For Asia, we currently have 90,000 recordings, which is about 1/5 of the total, and or 1/6. Or indeed 1/7. Okay, that's okay. We have about 200 species that are still missing, and people can contribute recordings of those, obviously, but there are many, many more subspecies that are currently missing. And India and Indonesia are particularly well represented, but many other countries are much more poorly represented. At least you can see from the last couple of, say, 2 years or so, that there's been a much more steady influx of recordings, and it doesn't fluctuate as widely as it did before. But that's very good. So just to give an example, so here's a species from Papua New Guinea that has, in Indonesia, that has many subspecies, and you can see them on the map, so that's cool. But then you can also have a look at all the subspecies which are currently missing. And there are probably many of them are already on file. People just haven't taken the time or don't have the knowledge to write it all down. So if you can contribute to that, then you can also just do that on the forum. Of course, we need an increase in repertoires. I have no idea how our coverage for repertoires in India or Asia in general is, but I'm sure there are many gaps that are still out there. And of course, you can add background identifications. So you can do that on the forum, or if you want to be very active, you can actually ask us to get some administrator permission so that you can do it by hand yourself and really add them. If you're just very knowledgeable in a certain area, you can drop us a line to try to do that. Okay, so lastly, how do you get the most out of the website? Well, you can, of course, delve into the subspecies. So here is a very famous example, the yellow wagtail from Europe, which has many, many subspecies. and plenty of them have we already have. And so you can try to find out if there's real differences. Many of these things are not known in the literature. And once you do that, you can write articles about that on the website. I'll hint about that in a minute. You can use maps to search with, not only so you can search by just typing in a name, but you can also use the maps to search. So if you do that, it's called a browse by region. You can just select a region, a rectangular area on the world map, and then you get all the recordings that we have from that area. And once you have those, you can filter. So the next slide, you see the same area essentially, but now I've just taken babbler species. And of course, there are much fewer of those, but you can filter all that. And if you click on the link, so the 227 recordings link at the bottom, you will get, you can go to all those recordings that are currently in that group that you filtered. You can make your own sets. So you can collect recordings and put them into your own sets and make that set publicly available or it's just private. So Meiendel, the area which is on the coast close to the Hague where I live, is a place I go to very frequently. So when I'm there, I just like to have an overview of all the bird sounds specific to that area. So this is, I don't think, a public list. And I just have it with me on my phone, and I can access that very quickly and filter in it. And so to just look up things quickly. So you can write articles also for yourself. So use it as a kind of a notebook, and you can make these public if you want to. And it is very easy to do that. It uses what's called markdown, which is a very loose version of HTML. And you can kind of write little articles or just set of notes for yourself. So the more technical, you can use the API to get raw data, which kind of looks like, well, raw data, and use that to build apps or other things. And if you want to really let yourself go, you can use something like Warbler, which is a package by Marcelo Araya Salas and Grace Smith Vidor, and which is written for a statistics package called R, which is also open, and that allows you to download recordings in an automated fashion and analyze them, all kinds of statistics, and do clustering analysis, and so you can really do sound analysis, acoustic analysis for bird sounds, specifically for the Xenocanto website. So that brings me to the end of my talk. I hope you've seen what you can do, and maybe I've given you a bit of inspiration of things you hadn't seen before and how you can still contribute even though there's already so much available. I very much invite everyone to try to contribute in whatever way you can, even if it is just on the forum or saying that something is not right, give some constructive criticism, what have you. But I want to thank Mohit, of course, for having me here, and all the different recordists and other people that have contributed. And I always have to thank Naturalis because they've been such a good sponsor over the last decade and a half. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. It was absolutely fantastic.
My pleasure.
Highly enlightening, and also one can see a lot of hard work that you and your colleagues have put in to bring this to the birding community. And I think it's work in progress, and we can see that how flexible you are to make it happen for people. And there are lots of people who are asking questions now here, like Dingley is asking, Xenocanto may want to consider mammal sounds. So you already answered that. And you said that you have that in the pipeline along with other species, and you're going to start with grasshoppers and then carry on to mammals and frogs and other species as you go along, because the platform is already set. And so I'm glad. So I hope that answers your question, Dingley. And then we have Chupsang from Bhutan. and he's asking you a question as well. And he says, is there a page on generalcanter where we can upload unknown calls for identification by experts?
Absolutely. So if you just go to the website itself, I have it here. I can just briefly, I can probably just share my screen and show you.
Yes,
so,
you can go ahead and do that.
So let me just take the window. Okay. So now
Yes.
now you probably see, okay, now, all right. So now you see the website, right? Okay.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So if you go here, so I'm logged in at the moment, but you don't need to be logged in. So if I go to mysteries, I will probably, that's a slow page. Here I go, upload a mystery recording. So I'm always logged in. So I can try to do this when I'm not logged in. So this is a page that actually needs updating because it just dumps thousands of things on a map, and that is very slow. Okay. So let me just log out for a moment. Now it's suddenly in Dutch. Let me just put it in English again. Okay. So mysteries, let me not try to do that. So what you should do is you should register. So you register here, and then you just log in after that. So let me just log in, and then you go to upload sounds, and you say, well, I don't know where I was, but I was over here. Okay, so it probably gives me some place in India, in Uttar Pradesh. So let's try that for now. And now here, if I just say that my identity is unknown, it makes this recording a mystery recording. And then, of course, you have to choose a file and type whatever information else you have at the bottom, and then you say next, and so you that is essentially what you have to do. Yeah, registration is free, but of course we have to know who you are in order to do this upload, and so you have to register as a member to do that.
That's good information. I hope that answers your question. Abid is asking, do you suggest some editing techniques, sound editing techniques and software as well?
Yep. I think the easiest one of choice is called Audacity. So that is called, I'm just typing that in the chat. I'm not sure how that, Audacity, as in the English word. And there's actually a guide on generalcanter, which I can hopefully find. All right, so let's go to the articles over here. Okay, so I mean, as an admin, I also see things that are not public. That is the ones that are in gray. So here, someone has written, a guy from Norway has written a way of using Audacity. And other people have contributed to that as well. So, and I think there was another one. Oh, yeah, so Volker Arnold, who is in German, has written, I think, a longer guide. So here it is. Yeah. So it's somewhere in Dropbox. You can have a look at it there, and I think that's quite long in terms of tips. All right.
Excellent. So there's another question. It says, Sanchari would like to know how significant would be cluster analysis of bird calls?
No, I think that very much depends on the application. So for us, it's already very interesting to just cluster and thereby make groups of things that are similar. And so that is useful for a number of things. But for instance, for us, it is interesting just to know what kind of variation we have within the collection. And so for some species, we just have now we have thousands of recordings, and it is very hard to find out what is in there. And so clustering is just helpful for that. But for particular, I think it's also used for taxonomic analyses where people try to write down or to make phylogenetic trees that are essentially just clustering things, right? And people also use sounds for that. And so I think you can use it for all kinds of purposes, depending on what kind of question you would like to answer.
Excellent. So if people have questions, they can always go to generalcanter and then post a question there for you. When you have time, you can answer them. If we cannot answer all the questions on this chat, but there's one question by Lakshmi ji, which she's asking, which machine learning challenges are prominent? Well, what she probably means is that, what are your challenges for machine learning?
I'm not an expert in this at all. I know that deep learning has made a big improvement on the algorithms, but the problem with machine learning is always that it might work at some point, but still you have no idea why it works. So if you do not know why it works, you also don't really know why it doesn't work. So that is one of the major things. It is clear that working on soundscapes where you have general recordings with many species is just a very hard problem. And so the first problem is to isolate the birds, the individual species, from the rest. And that is already a very hard problem. And I think you need way more data for that than we currently have. So something like 500,000 recordings sounds a lot. But if there are 10,000 species, that means that there on average are 50 recordings per species, and that is really not very much. And for these kinds of algorithms. And so we just need maybe 10 times or 100 times that volume in order to train these algorithms well, I think. But as I said, I'm not a machine learning person, and so I don't really know what the major obstacles is. I just know that there are some challenges there that the current algorithms are just really not good at, and I do not really know how to overcome them.
Great. So, Dr. Bob, I think it's been a absolutely wonderful presentation. I know that Rajneesh and a lot of other people have fantastic questions for you, but I know that we're going to run out of time. It may be very useful if, would you like to share your email or you suggest that they go online on XC's website and write their questions, or
yes,
would you be happy taking their questions directly?
Yeah, that's very easy. I could just put it in the... So that is my personal account on Xenocanto. If you want to just ask, you can always answer, sort of use this one, which is also just on the web. That is read by me and by Willem Pier. So it's not that the number of people that reads this is a huge improvement on just me, but you might get an answer slightly quicker. So there was a private question to me that I can just publicly answer quickly on the use of recordings in PhD work. I'm sure that is fine. So non-commercial work is fine. The only thing we want is that there's an accreditation of the person who made the recording. Yes, that is all. So go ahead, use the catalog numbers and improve your research by it.
Yeah. So we have one person here. His name is Mr. Pratap Singh, and he's been one of the pioneers when it comes to bird sounds in India, and he has spent many years of his life recording bird sounds in different parts. So just one question from him, would be very useful. This is what kind of backup Xenocanter is planning in view of increasing recording and uncompressed WAV format.
Yeah, so we've been running a dedicated server in RAID with a backup. So what that means is you have two hard disks. sort of stacked on top of each other, and they're continuously synchronized. So that if one fails, you always immediately have the other one. And next to that, there's just a similar RAID backup version, which is synced every day. And so that is what we currently do to have a backup of the entire system. And so we've talked to the British Library once whether we were doing something similar to them, because they make a digital copy of the original tape, so the cassette tape, if it was a cassette, for the older generation. And then they store the cassette tape, then they store the digital version in 4 bomb-proof locations all across Great Britain, because they have a 1,000-year horizon that they actually plan for. I have to admit, we do not do the same. We don't have that kind of manpower and funding, but I think it is very secure as it is at the moment. And so if you want to consider using generalcanter as a platform for your recordings, then you'd be more than welcome. If you want to talk some more, then just drop me a line. I'd be happy to talk.
That's so awesome. Absolutely fantastic webinar it was, Dr. Bob. And I'm so happy and I'm so thankful that you could be here to address the Indian fraternity of birders and wildlifers. And also a lot of people from different parts of the world are also here. And we've got almost 350, registrations here today, and that's a very large number. I'd like to thank all the ladies and gentlemen who've come here, spend their time listening to Dr. Bob and increasing and appreciating his work. And friends, this is what Asian Adventures is committed to. We want to bridge gaps in conservation. This is what we are here for, and I will keep bringing you more such webinars. And this doesn't end at this. If you want to co-host, let me know. And if you want Dr. Bob, you and I will talk and see how we can support, help generalcanter even in future to take the cause further. It's like if you have a number of species, let's say 200 species, which are not being recorded in different parts of Asia. It's good for us to know this and then put this out through different kinds of communication, so that the faster it grows, the better it is for the conservation world. So I'm really, really happy, thankful, really. And I'd like to thank my team, and I'd like to thank my friend Mark Hout for introducing me to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Good night. Good night, friends. Good night, Shabba Khair. Love you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.